Vern, what happened?
Don't worry about it, I'm fine. So, Eddie, you are interested after all.
That stuff's amazing.
Works better if you're already smart.
Vern, who did this to you?
Trust me, you don't want to know.
So, what's it called?
Wow, he did not hesitate. Everybody, and welcome to the Cinema Psych Podcast, the podcast where psychology meets film. I am your host, Dr. Alex Swan, and this episode is going to harken back to a time at the very, very beginning of this podcast, 5 years ago. We had a little rage watch, and we rage watched Lucy. Well, you might be thinking, well, I didn't listen to that episode. What'd you rage watch Lucy about? Well, we did it because Lucy has the 10% brain myth as like the central conceit of the movie. And then when you unlock it with a drug, you get superpowers, basically. More and more superpowers. So that's why we don't unlock it. We don't want to have superpowers because how cool would that be? Lame, apparently, right? Anyways, this Rage Watch is going to be about a similar idea, but rather than superpowers, more along the lines of, like, thinking powers. Perhaps in the realm of possibility, not quite there yet, but we're still angry about it. If you're unfamiliar with Limitless, film came out in 2011, directed by Neil Berger, with writers Leslie Dixon and Alan Glynn, because the movie is based on the book The Dark Fields by Alan Glynn, and that book came out in 2001. The film stars Bradley Cooper as our protagonist, Eddie Mora, who is always trying to dance that moral line, ends up crossing it, realizes, he's made some errors, and he figures out a way out. The ending is interesting. It's classic psych thriller kind of ending, but more political. I think it could have been better. Anyways, Bradley Cooper is our main character. He's the one who takes the drug and gets all smacked. Abby Cornish plays his love interest in this movie. A very one-dimensional character in Abby Cornish. Somebody who basically puts up with Eddie's bullshit all the time, right? That's it. That's all she's there for, honestly. Robert De Niro plays Carl Van Loon, a mogul kind of person, a shrewd businessman, investor type bad guy. I guess like a hedge fund that comes in and takes over a business and whatnot. I'm not entirely sure. That has always confused me about this movie, like what it is that Robert De Niro's character does. But that's I could probably do another whole podcast on that. Andrew Howard plays a kind of a thug, generic bad guy, mafia type person. I think Russians, maybe something like that. Anna Friel plays Melissa. And we really aren't going to talk about much more other people in this movie. It's really Lindy, Eddie, and Carl Van Loon, and maybe a little Gennady, which is Andrew Howard's character. But other than that, everyone else is kind of a bit character in this movie. So, yeah. Anyways, if you are not familiar with the movie, you may have seen that there was a TV show that was made, and it was actually loosely connected to the movie. Bradley Cooper executive produced the TV show, and his character Eddie Mora shows up in a special guest role in a few episodes, I think. The show Limitless came out in 2015, and it ran for only one season, but the character in that show, Brian Finch, is connected to Eddie Mora. So just in case you spotted this one season show on CBS almost a decade ago, actually. Whoa. Didn't even realize that until I looked it up. So anyways, back to the movie, because we're not going to actually pay attention to the TV show. So we're going to jump into our Rage Watch. So stick around and hear us arg about Limitless. My guest host today is Dr. Christina Ragan. Since the last time she joined us, a pandemic happened. She moved to Atlanta, got married, had a baby, and is now an academic professional in the School of Biological Sciences in the undergraduate neuroscience program at Georgia Tech. What a mouthful. That's a lot. A lot of stuff has happened since she's been on the show. She leads the Molecular Mechanisms of Mothering and Anxiety, MAMA for short, lab, and is the director of neuroscience outreach at GA Tech. So, Christina, welcome back to the show. Oh my, it's been so long.
Way too long, but I'm so happy to be back. And I guess this has been enough time to reset my hypothalamus for what I thought was going to be a good old-fashioned rage watch. Although, I gotta be honest, I really didn't get that ragey this time. Not as ragey as I got watching Lucy. So thanks for having me back.
I am happy, so happy to have you back. And I've been thinking about this rage watch / watch since like 2022 or something like that. It's been a while since I've been thinking, I must get Christina back onto the show. And so I'm so glad we were able to get this to finally go, because it is a very similar movie to Lucy. And although, listener, I just hyped this up to be a rage watch, it really kind of didn't leave us all that ragey. I'm with you, Christina.
Yeah.
So
if I had a Fitbit, it would not be telling me to chill out, really.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So before we jump into the psych stuff, because there is plenty of it, just like there was in Lucy, let's get your sense of the movie. What did you think of the film in general?
Okay, so I originally came in with some pretty judgy thoughts, because here I am thinking like, all right, Lucy Part 2 or something. But, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't even want to pay to watch it. I looked up it on, some streaming services. It wasn't on anything. And so I got a DVD. And I can't even remember the last time I watched a DVD, but I think it was Lucy, to be honest. I've been so spoiled by streaming services.
Right.
But yeah, so actually, I think it actually had some pretty good points. It talks about neuroplasticity in a fairly accurate way, I think. Or just, small nods to it, not getting too jargony.
Right.
And I thought the writing was really good. And there's one part with De Niro that we'll talk about later that just I really liked his little speech to Eddie. So overall, I'd probably give this like a a B plus.
Okay, you're on the grading. You're on the grading scale as a teacher. Yeah, I am fully subsumed in the star rating system because of being on Letterboxd. But so you say B plus? Is that what that was?
Yeah, so that's what, probably like 3.5,
maybe. Yeah,
so?
I was gonna say I feel like this is a 3.5 to 4-star movie for me. I'm leaning maybe towards 4-star because of Bradley Cooper being able to play nuanced versions of this character, Eddie. When he was before he ever tried NZT, to when he was first high on it, to when he's coming down off it, like the various levels of Bradley Cooper on this one. He did a really great job. And so I'll lean towards the 4-star on that one. So I wanted to piggyback off of that question, and because it's kind of like Lucy, but more on the we'll get the edge of the science loosey goosey side of it, rather than just like complete and utter disregard for anything scientific on the Lucy side. So how would you use this film in your teaching? I think you said you had a story to share with us.
I do, yeah. So right now I'm teaching a seminar style course on neuroplasticity and neurodegeneration. So concepts like long-term potentiation, learning and memory, and of course ethics all come up in our discussions pretty much daily. Yeah, so in fact, today, the movie came up quite organically. So we were reading a paper about bilingualism and whether or not it's protective against Alzheimer's. Okay. So pretty cool kind of study. It was very fMRI based. And one of the students asked the student discussion leaders, is there a limit to the number of languages we can learn? Of course, we don't have an answer to that, right? There really is no capacity for learning anything. Right. But I said, well, let me tell you. So I watched this film, Limitless, and some of them had seen it. And in fact, he becomes multilingual, right, not just bilingual, and he learns it so fast. So it was really cool to bring that up in class today, and I was like, I don't think we've really got a limit. I don't think we know of any kind of capacity for learning, especially learning a language.
Yeah, considering that we, as long as the languages follow the universal rules that human languages have all evolved from, I think we could do that. Now, can we manipulate it? That's the question, right? So the difference between long-term memory and working memory, that's such an interesting topic. I wish I could have taken your seminar, but you're almost done with it, right?
Right. It's just a few more days. And the students actually, they've said, we want to have a movie day in class. So, probably not in class, but maybe if they want to stick around later on the last day, maybe we'll watch Limitless.
Ooh.
We'll see.
Yeah, there's probably some other fun stuff in that neuroplasticity, neurodegeneration realm too. Some that will make them cry though. So maybe Limitless won't make them like sob, Yes.
The Notebook has come up several times
in this
class.
Still Alice, like every single one about Alzheimer's is just tear-inducing. It's probably because memory and our abilities to use it is what a lot of people think make us. And so to lose that, man, we're getting far off of field here. Back to drugs that make us smarter. Okay, so let's inform the people here, because it's important that while I've been saying that I came up with Limitless, we both came up with it together at different points in time. So we both came to it. So, Christina, what were your reasons for choosing Limitless?
Well, originally I thought it was going to make me mad, just like Lucy did. But I did want to compare it to Lucy. And I really was curious how they were going to handle different neuroscience topics and if there were any small grains of truth or feasibility presented, right? So could this actually happen as compared to Lucy, where it got a little too sci-fi for my liking.
Superpowers.
Like, superpowers, goo.
Yeah.
Spoiler, Bradley doesn't turn into a goo.
Right.
He stays in his pretty much typical body.
Yeah, and shows signs of actual, like, real drug withdrawal.
Yes. I think his biggest physical change was that he cut his hair. And thank goodness he did.
Yeah. Oh boy, it was looking... there are like 3 stages of the hair, too, because you have the scraggly long in the beginning, and then the Bradley Cooper short, that I call it, because he has that hair in everything he does, right? Sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little bit shorter. And then in the epilogue, he's got the like really short hair for Bradley Cooper. He always looks
the politician.
Yeah, he always looks so strange to me with that hair, because he never has that hair in anything that he does.
No.
So I was like, ooh, that looks like a wig, bro. So it doesn't turn to goo.
No. So that already upped the star rating for me.
And the plausibility rating.
That's pretty high too, I think. I mean, the speed at which everything happened probably is a little bit far-fetched. And maybe, you know, some of the after effects, not so sure. But yeah, it seemed a little bit more feasible. And some people have compared this NZT to an actual drug.
Yeah.
Modafinil.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So this modafinil has been used for like fighter pilots to be able to stay up a long time. So of course it's been used in the military. But, you know, I was looking up the mechanism of action, and it's not actually known. It could be quite a dirty drug.
Wow.
Certainly. Yeah. I thought maybe we would know that it was something like cocaine, but it seems to increase dopamine, and it indirectly increases serotonin, norepinephrine. So that makes sense. It's certainly a stimulant.
Okay.
But we don't really know exactly what it binds to. Molecularly, the structure looks like dopamine, similar. But yeah, and it's one of these stimulants that doesn't really actually give a high.
Okay.
Which is similar to this NZT drug as well. So it was thought, it doesn't really have as much of an abuse potential.
Okay.
Because there's really no euphoria.
Euphoria,
on it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if there would be still some psychological addiction there. Not physical addiction, but psychological addiction.
Creative problems, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose I can help you with that. Just this once.
Oh, no.
You don't even know what it is.
Still dealing.
Brother, I am light years from that now. I've been doing some consulting for a pharmaceutical company.
Well, like some offshore lab making fake Viagra? Come on, Vern.
No. This is an exclusive product. It's coming on stream next year. They've had clinical trials and it's FDA approved.
All right, just out of curiosity, and that's all. That's it. What's in it?
They've identified these receptors in the brain that activate specific circuits. And you know how they say that we can only access 20% of our brain? Well, what this does, it lets you access all of it.
So let's use that as a jumping point for discussing this NZT. So we've got this, I'd imagine, heavily restricted modafinil, probably only government allowed.
Yeah, not over the counter.
Yeah.
Not over the counter as far as I can tell.
Probably not even prescription, I would imagine, right?
I don't think so.
It's not publicly available. Yeah, so let's talk about NZT, because it plays an important MacGuffin role, of course. It is the object that drives the plot for sure. But it also is the major psychological and neuropsychological agent and concept in this. So what I wanted to do in this segment, Christina, is talk about the drug and its biological effects, its physiological effects from what we see in the movie and what's expositioned to us, that kind of thing. And then in the second segment, kind of talk about the plausibility of the neuroscience aspect of it, right? Sure. So let's talk about the pill first. So it's introduced to us in a very devious way. I think the way this was meant to be introduced to the audience was twofold. One, the normal storytelling tactic. You got to have a hook for the not only the main character, but the viewer and everything. Okay, do this. But I think lying to us about NZT and being positive about it first has an effect on the audience to increase our moral acceptance of it. Okay. So that,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So we are introduced to NZT as a FDA approved nootropic drug that basically gives you focus, kind of like the psychostimulants that are on the market for ADHD, right? Like Ritalin, as a market name. So we get this, and it's FDA approved. It's it's going to revolutionize everything. Maybe a little pricey with $800 a pill, like that Martin Shkreli guy who, like,
holy cow, yeah, Farmer Bro. I
Farmer
think
Bro,
wouldn't even
right?
make it. He wouldn't even make it at that price. So, woo.
Yeah, so $800 a pill, right? Woo, 30-day supply on that one. Oh boy. So other than its price, man, the character that is this old friend of Eddie makes it seem amazing. So, Christina, what are the properties of this drug, and what can you tell us about the drug and what it does?
So it's very clearly a stimulant.
Okay.
And, and I'm sitting here trying to figure out, like, okay, what is this mechanism of action? Because it's not quite like ADHD medication, so Ritalin, Adderall. It has kind of the focus properties that you mentioned, but it doesn't. Well, it doesn't have a high. Yeah, it seems,
as Eddie explains.
And right. He even says, that he doesn't experience a high. He just has this. He's wired. He's clear, right? But yeah, so since he's very focused, that leads us to believe that, okay, clearly a stimulant, but then it doesn't really affect his sleep. Like, if he wants to go to sleep, he'll go to sleep. But if he wants to stay up for 18 hours, he can stay up. So that's what makes it a little bit different.
Okay.
From some of these other stimulants. It doesn't quite affect his appetite if he remembers to eat. So it's not the same kind of stimulant as like a typical appetite suppressant.
Okay, like a nicotine.
He's just, yeah, right. And so that's what's kind of unusual here is, like, it's not that he doesn't want to eat. He's just doing all these other cool things. Yeah. And I guess maybe eating would take him away from that. And so he learns, like, okay, I got to remember to eat, or I'm going to have this really bad reaction, and I got to sleep. So yeah, it's most likely acting on some of those wake promoting neurons. So things like norepinephrine, acetylcholine. These are all these kind of neurotransmitters that are helping us stay awake and also stay focused.
Home. But it couldn't be my home, could it?
Now, who would live like this? My first thought, torch it. But saner heads prevailed. What was this drug? I couldn't stay messy on it. I hadn't had a cigarette in 6 hours, hadn't eaten. So, abstemious and tidy? What was this? A drug for people who wanted to be more anal retentive? I wasn't high, wasn't wired, just clear. I knew what I needed to do and how to do it. The next morning, I sent a little probe down into my brain. No surge of brilliance came up to greet me. In short, I was back. But something remained.
You're kidding.
Oh.
Words have appeared on paper,
Yes.
written by you.
All you have to do is read 3 pages. Just read 3 pages in the next hour, and if you don't want to keep reading, I'll give you back the advance. Okay.
Okay, Eddie.
Okay.
What about a stimulant like cocaine? So, of course, we've just been comparing it to modafinil, but what about the cocaine style stimulants?
Yeah, so cocaine targets the dopamine transporter. And so what that does is it blocks reuptake of dopamine.
Okay.
So that means more dopamine can bind to its receptors and do its motivating actions on the reward pathway.
Okay.
And so it probably has something like this, but again, it doesn't quite have, well, it certainly has a longer half-life than cocaine does.
Yeah.
Meaning that it can stay active longer
Right.
than cocaine
We see that
does.
he doesnand need another dose for like almost a whole day.
You're right. Yeah. It seems like it almost lasts a whole day. Yeah. And he doesn't really, I don't think you see him ever get jittery
No.
from any kind of that overstimulation, but yeah, and he doesn't get high, right? And so cocaine would produce that euphoria. So it's not quite cocaine, but it could maybe act on some of those dopamine transporters to increase dopamine availability.
It's so fascinating because we know a lot about compound actions in cellular structures, right? At both the cellular organelle level and then even further down at the molecular level, right? And of course, physicists with the molecular and elemental level can be like, and we can go even deeper, So
all those quarks.
Yeah, all those quarks, right? So it's just fascinating to me that as you're talking about all of these molecular actions in our physiology, I'm just thinking like how they present it in the movie almost is a combination of what the drug does in the brain, plus the kinds of signals that you find in somebody with severe OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder or in autism. And it's like combining all of these actions into a single mode. And that mode is turned on almost epigenetically. It's almost like NZT48 turns that on, and it's just like activating a bunch of different genes. That's the kind of thing that I felt like when I'm watching this. I'm like, hey, it can't just be something simple like cocaine or like methamphetamine or even just amphetamines, right?
Yeah. And those all also target the dopamine transporter. But what came to my mind was, okay, long-term potentiation. It is speeding up long-term potentiation.
That too.
What that is,
sure.
And so what that is the strengthening of synapses through repeated stimulation. So, right, if you were practicing something over and over again, your neurons are releasing a lot of glutamate. Glutamate can bind to its receptors and then do some downstream effects, so a cascade of events that can change your gene expression. So, but that can take at least a few hours for the early LTP process. But this is happening, what did they say? How quick? 20 minutes, maybe? When it kicks in? Something like that. So this would be super sped up, long-term potentiation and
compounding long-term potentiation even, right? So cumulative.
Right. Yeah. So it seems to be long lasting because he says, I'm off the drug, but my synapses are changed. And I was like, yay, you could be kind of right there, right?
Yeah,
you don't necessarily need to have the direct exposure of the drug for the synapses to be at least somewhat permanently changed. They might over time get weakened without the drug being there, but maybe, it had been only a little while. So it could be that he had some kind of semi-permanent neuroplasticity.
Yeah, so we'll hold that thought for the next segment. But so going back to the lie about the FDA clinical trial, FDA approved, gone through clinical trials. So as someone who researches in the drug realm, can you give a quick overview to the listener on how clinical trials work and why they call the drug NZT-48 in the movie and nothing else?
Happy to. So I do have to give some credit to my husband, Dr. Zachary Grebe, because he works in small pharma. And we were having this discussion. Yeah, he's not in big pharma, small pharma. And so clinical trials, they are not quick. They are at least 10 to 15 years, maybe even 20. And they're starting with tens of thousands of compounds, potential compounds, just if they can make it in the lab or isolate it from a plant or something. Okay. Then they narrow it down to a few. And then they might do some tests in some petri dishes. And then they move on to non-human animals to see, okay, are there any side effects just that we see in the animals? And can we even deliver it? And that can take a few years right there. And then after that, you have healthy human volunteers, again, to check some of the side effects and not even looking at the efficacy or how well the drug is doing what it's supposed to do. And then you have
just what it's not supposed to do.
Right. Yeah. So then after a few years after that, so I guess we're already pushing 7 to 8 years, maybe 10 years right now. Now we can move to a small group of the clinical population. So the population that you're targeting with this drug. And then you check the safety again and the efficacy. And I had students ask me, oh, do they die in clinical trials? I said, absolutely. Even the healthy controls do. I mean, they get paid pretty well, but yeah, they can die in these trials. And so then you go on to the larger population. So a really high sample size of your clinical population that you're targeting to see how well it works and the safety. And then it goes on to FDA approval. And so, that's a really long process. So this NZT-48, the name alone is a giveaway that it is not FDA approved. And so somebody did their homework there, knowing that giving this kind of alphabet soup rather than Prozac, right? Ozempic, these brand names. So that NZT-48 is at what's called the investigational stage. That's the investigational name. So that means that it hasn't been FDA approved and who knows what part of any clinical trials it has been in. Then there's a compound name, which we were never given. And then after that, a product name. So that would be like the brand name if it went that far.
Right. If they have the copyright on it.
Right. Yeah. So when Eddie asks the scientist, oh, I'll give you all this money if you can do it in 6 months. I wouldn't take a drug that had only been researched in 6 months.
Right.
So no, thank you.
On nothing either. Like I just need the drug in 6 months. They yada yada all over the how was it tested or did you reverse engineer it properly?
Right.
Like,
he doesn't even know what it's made out of. Like, we have no idea what it's made out of, where it comes from.
I'm just gonna put this in my mouth because my friend said it was okay.
Oh no, now we're getting into dare education here.
Yes, peer pressure is bad, you know.
Oh.
Here is one example of it being very terrible, but then also good, but then terrible again, and then ultimately good. Like, yeah. Again, moral, you gotta smudge the moral line so you get buy-in on this, like really kind of a dirtbag character. He's not a likable dude before he takes the NZT, and then he's not really all that likable after he takes the NZT. And so the audience has to buy in this somehow, and it's going to be that if I was offered a drug like that, I might take it. Or this guy's down on his luck. I mean, he just needs a break.
Just needs a little boost, a little confidence boost.
Yeah. So a name like Prozac is the brand name, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And then
so that's the product. Yeah, the product name.
And then fluoxetine is the compound name.
Right. Yeah. So that's the generic term.
Okay.
So different companies can produce the generic fluoxetine, but Eli Lilly came up with Prozac.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And but other companies had to wait until Eli Lilly lost their trademark on the chemical compound, right?
Yeah, and working with health insurance companies. There's that's a long story. But,
right.
Yeah. But yeah,
America.
So turning it into a generic.
Gotcha. And so because $800 a pill was just a fiction of its probably street value, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to a product having a full-on marketing strategy after FDA approval, right?
Well, maybe they gave the scientists who created the drug a really good livable wage, and maybe that's why it was so expensive. I mean, but to be more realistic, I mean, if you look at things like chemotherapy drugs, they are ridiculously priced, but then insurance tends to cover most of it. But I can't imagine this being a therapeutic other than maybe arguing for ADHD, ADD.
Yeah.
But is it doing what Ritalin and Adderall aren't doing?
Yeah. I mean, if NZT was a real drug, I think the answer is yes, right? I love the line that his friend gives him in the beginning. It helps it when you're smarter. And I thought that was a good it's better when you're smarter, I think is what the line was. So I think that's kind of funny, and I want to carry that into our second segment.
So what's it called?
Doesn't have a street name yet, but the boys in the kitchen are calling it NZT-48.
The boys in the kitchen? That doesn't sound very FDA approved, Vern.
FDA approved, that's a laugh. You never even believe that shit, did you?
Okay, so what do we have here? Some unknown, untested, possibly dangerous drug scammed out of some unidentified lab somewhere, given to me by a highly unreliable guy I hadn't seen in years.
So you want some more?
Yes, definitely.
Before we move on from the NZT pill itself, let's briefly chat about the effects that we see, the physical effects, and of course the physical withdrawal before we jump into the neuropsychology and the neuroscience of it. So before we talk about the actual effects, I just want to say that I love the filmmaking choice for us, the audience, to know when a character, well, really in this case, Eddie Mora, because we're seeing everything from his perspective. He's narrating the story. The filmmaking technique that they used, brighter, more vibrant colors to convey to the watcher that his senses are enhanced. He's seeing things in HD or whatever. And so the filmmakers made the film itself, the frames, more vibrant. They saturated this and gave it kind of like a glow, even to differentiate when he's not on the drug. And now things look duller and more brown, really. And so our senses are, it's just really dull in the sense that everything is dull about his cognition. So I thought that was a really cool technique that they did. And they do carry it throughout the movie when he's fighting the goons, the Russian goons at near the end of the movie. It's very dull. And he's off the drug, and he's going through withdrawals and everything like that. Colors are kind of washed away. He's laying on the ground. He's licking up blood, and this blood kind of looks almost black. And you're like, what is he? What is he trying to drink? What? Oh no!
Yep.
And then
you
hear the narration. You hear the narration of Bradley Cooper just saying, you know, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. And as he's drinking it, the colors start to return to the frame. And you finally see, as he's narrating, I'm drinking this guy's blood, you see the redness of the blood. I thought it was great. So, Christina, what are the effects that Eddie describes in the movie of this drug?
Right. So he's, experiencing all this clarity, but he's not wired, right? So it's kind of not your typical stimulant. He learned the piano in 3 days. He was a avid gambler because he could do all the math in his head really fast. He was fluent in multiple languages. He was like Neo from the Matrix, right? So he picked up even Kung Fu.
Right.
Right. And so, it seems like he's just hyper focused. And like you're saying, his perception is just so clear and vibrant. But he can pick up anything, like any small little detail that is in his environment, and he seems even almost clairvoyant. Yeah. So there's the scene with Van Loon where he's like, that van is gonna crash into that car. Yeah. And because he's doing all the calculation, like, okay, he could see into the van that the person was distracted while they're driving, and I guess doing the calculations of the brakes probably not being able to stop the car in enough time. Like, that is insano.
Yeah, he's running through cool. whatever the brain does as computations, right? Yeah. He's just running them through faster. And you brought it up a little bit ago with the synapses, and he says, oh, maybe my synapses just work better. And I one of the tenets of neuroscience is that one neuron, you're good. 2 neurons, you can have a conversation, right? 3 neurons, 3 is most definitely a welcome crowd, right? 4 is company, and then so on and so forth. And as many conversations as you can have, the better, right? So the more neurons, and then the more connections they have with one another, which is why the cerebellum cells are so chatty, and they're very good at what they do in maintaining balance and coordinating our motor movements and all of these other things, right? That the cerebellum doesn't get enough credit for, honestly.
Poor little brain.
Yeah, the wee brain. But in any case, like, right, if you expand that kind of structure to the cortex neurons, then like they're going to be able to do all those even like heuristic. I don't want to call them calculations. Even heuristic thinking is probably sped up even more. But instead of giving up accuracy for speed, right? There's no trade-off.
Yeah.
You end up with speed and accuracy growing counterintuitively.
Right. Yeah. Usually when we have an enhanced part of our brain, so if there's neuroplasticity occurring in one part, there might be another part that actually loses brain cells or loses synapses.
Interesting. So wild.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
It's got to be conserved in some way.
Right. So it's like the balance. I guess there's this natural balance in the brain, but he doesn't have that occur. It seems like everywhere can have this synaptic plasticity, this LTP occur. And I don't know how he's not starving all the time.
Yeah.
Because wouldn't the brain need way more glucose? Like we already take up, what is it, like 20% of our glucose goes to the brain.
Right.
So where is it a bunch of glucose inside the pill too that he's getting? I don't know, but I would imagine that he would need all this extra fuel to power all this processing.
Yeah, and I think maybe that they try to address. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I want to kind of rephrase how I'm saying this with my intonation. I feel like as far as the viewer is concerned, you shouldn't worry about his hunger, except when he says something like, I gotta remember to eat, because he can get so lost and focused. And I think that is to indicate that this is a drug that you can starve on. Like it still does have its pitfalls. Did you notice any side effects? So one thing that Americans are very well versed on are side effects of drugs because of commercial law in this country, where not only do Americans have to be subjected to drug commercials, two, they are required by law to provide the viewer with side effects. And
right.
The best ones are always side effects may incur, blah, 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 and possibly death.
And death, right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, this is when the movie turned into The Hangover, because he's getting these time skips, right? So he couldn't account for like 18 hours of his day. And so it seems like there's kind of this like blacking out.
Yeah.
Which seems more like, alcohol, which is a depressant.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's what's so curious about this drug is it's kind of has this buffet of different modes of action and effects. But yeah, so that was probably the most disturbing side effect of this. Just like, I don't know what I did all day.
Yeah.
Did I do things that I wouldn't normally do?
Right. Yeah, it's wild. It almost acts as if perhaps giving credence to fugue or dissociative states, right? Mm-hmm. And because we are following the sober Eddie Mora as our perspective, that dissociated Eddie Mora we are also naive to, ignorant of.
Yeah. So is it promoting a little bit of psychosis?
Yeah,
now?
interesting. Because that would be a marked feature of psychosis, is some kind of disconnect with reality. He doesn't show typical signs of that, like hallucinations or delusions, which is also interesting. So it's like dissociation and dissociative disorders rather than psychotic disorders.
Yeah, that's fair. And he doesn't get particularly aggressive unless provoked, right? It's not like he just is always aggressive. He's just really competent.
Yeah.
Right. And then if he does have to defend himself, he knows Kung Fu.
Because I
Matrix.
I learned it in a second. Yeah. I know Kung Fu.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, don't tell me I look good, because I know. I didn't want you to see me this way. You look good.
Oh, I sort of got myself together.
And ZT will do that to you.
What do you mean?
I mean, I took it too. Vernon didn't tell you any of this, did he?
No.
Well, when he told me about this amazing new drug, I was like down the hatch, and it was amazing. You know, I read Brian Greene's The Elegant Universe in 45 minutes, and I understood it. My work rate increased just insanely overnight, and my boss started to hate me. And they offered me his job, and then I got scared.
Why?
Why? Because I'm not stupid. Nobody can operate at that level of mental activity and not crash. I stopped taking it.
And
I got sick. Headaches. Throwing up. So I went back to Vernon. He told me about all the people that were dying. How much have you been taking, Eddie?
I've been taking a lot.
Well, maybe they've worked out the bugs. Maybe this is a different batch.
Yeah.
You're off it right now, aren't you?
Just finish your story.
Well, I didn't take any more, and I didn't die. But after a while, I realized that I couldn't concentrate on anything for longer than 10 minutes. I missed deadlines, got lazy, so slow. That was 2 years ago. And I haven't been the same since. You have some left? Good. Well, you go home and you take it. You take the dose down, but you don't just stop. You'll die if you just stop. Try to taper off. Otherwise, the headaches are just the beginning. I have to go.
Do you know who makes it?
I don't know. I have to go.
So we've got these side effects while he's on the drug. What about the last bit of addiction terminology here, withdrawal? What kind of things do the withdrawal symptoms get portrayed as?
Yeah, so the most prominent is these headaches.
Mm-hmm.
And then he can't concentrate for more than like 10 minutes. So now you've got something happening with his attention, his focus.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so again, I'm trying to find these parallels with some other drugs. And I mean, a lot of drugs can cause headaches when you're off of it, but this sounds again like alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
right? So kind of almost like a hangover.
Yeah. A hangover. Yeah, because you did mention the blacking out feature of drinking alcohol, binge drinking alcohol, I should say.
Right, right.
And so, yeah, he's got, I have been told by my son's doctor that when you're coming off and coming down from an amphetamine, so he takes methylphenidate, and when you're coming down from those, that the hyperactivity can come back and maybe a little bit stronger because of the effects of the come down. And so like a compensation mechanism, I guess. I was just curious if that maybe struck you here, that it in many ways mirrors Adderall and Ritalin and methylphenidate in this way, but then also this withdrawal kind of is similar too.
Yeah, I can see that too. Absolutely. It does sound a lot like what happens with amphetamines, but not totally aligning with all of them.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it could be some kind of similarly structured amphetamine-like drug.
Right. And I know, listener, you're like, oh, we're trying to break down like what drug it is. Honestly, to wrap up discussion, yes, it is a drug of convenience. It has all the effects the writers want and all of the withdrawals the writers need to make the story more compelling. So, any last thoughts on NZT-48, Christina?
It's a dangerous drug, man, and I think that
I don't know.
Yeah, it had the potential, but I don't know. I don't want to be wrapped up with the Russian goons.
Okay,
I don't want to drag my loved ones into it.
That's fair.
Okay, but yeah, definitely some kind of stimulant, and definitely something that's acting on your attentional systems and promoting long-term potentiation.
All right. So actually, I want to back up. You think the headaches are like aneurysms?
Whoa. Could be maybe mini strokes. I mean,
mini strokes. Wow.
What if the brain, maybe the brain is like, wait, you were giving me all this information and now I have nothing. Maybe it's even mini seizures. I don't know.
Yeah. When the headaches, like it's always, so when I first saw the movie, I'm like, oh man, I was like, these people are going to die of aneurysms. They're just going to go, ooh, and then keel over because their brain exploded, kind of keel over and die because they had a, massive hemorrhage or whatever because of the aneurysm. But then when you get back on the drug, everything's all fine and dandy again. So it's like, it's like having to clear a kidney stone or something. And then you get the drugs that dissolve the stones or whatever. And you're like, as I hear, you have sweet relief. So
yes,
I don't know, aneurysms, mini strokes. It's all crazy. All right. So in the next segment, what we're going to do is talk about the neuroscience of it all. So go a little bit deeper into really the cognitive neuroscience of it and explore how they did with this one. So stick around. We'll be right back talking Limitless. Are you a big fan of the Cinema Psych podcast? A connoisseur of the compelling stories and intriguing insights that we have on this show? Well, show your love in style with our premium podcast merchandise. Yeah, that's right. I've updated the podcast store from ultra comfy hoodies, perfect for cozy podcast binges, to sleek coffee mugs that add a dash of personality to your morning routine. Our merchandise store has it all. I've added so many new products, and it's designed to withstand countless listening marathons. There are a lot of episodes. I think you'll love them. But wait, there is more. Every week, there is a new promotion, turning up the volume on value. So keep an eye out for our exciting special promotions. Every other week, 15% off. In between, sometimes there's a special 25% off day. And then sometimes there's free shipping. It's the perfect way to score your Cinema Psych podcast merch for less. I'm excited to have expanded the merchandise offerings, but I'm really excited to say that new designs are coming up. And you can put these designs on all of the merchandise. So keep an eye out for new arrivals in the design section. So don't just listen, wear it, flaunt it, live it. Visit our merchandise store at cinemapsychpod.swanpsych.com/store to shop your love for the Cinema Psych podcast today. Remember, every purchase goes directly to supporting this show. And of course, thanks for listening to this show. I love doing it. Now let's get back into it. And we are back talking Limitless with Dr. Christina Ragan. And in the last segment, we went over the drug itself, NZT 48, and this similar drug is used in the TV show. And so in this segment, I wanted to discuss with you, Christina, the cognitive neuroscience of it all, right? So some of the effects that we haven't talked about are on the psychological end of it. And I know the first segment was less psychological than some people expect. Biopsych is a class, right? Cognitive neuroscience is a class. We talk about behavioral neuroscience as a class. So we talk about all of these things within psychology classes. And don't be fooled, dear listener, that Christina teaches in the neuroscience program at GA Tech. Neuroscience is a lovely cousin to psychology. And Christina used to teach psychology courses. So,
yeah.
You know.
They're near and dear, and we learned a lot about neuroscience through psychology.
And she does STP stuff, and that's psychology in the title. So, boom, got her. So one of the things that fascinated me, Christina, about some of the things that Eddie was able to do in this movie had to do with memory and intelligence. So how did Eddie talk about this, and what can you add with your expertise in sort of analyzing how he explained it?
Yeah, so it seemed like he would pick up anything pretty quickly, or he could memorize something very quickly, something that someone not on NZT would need lots and lots of practice to do.
Okay.
And yeah, so this is kind of skipping the memory acquisition, like learning acquisition steps, and going right from encoding right into storage and retrieval right away. And usually that would take a much longer time, depending on the skill or whatever you're trying to remember.
Right.
And so he has not only the speed, but he also has incredible accuracy, which is usually at the expense of speed.
Right.
So he's bypassing some of that.
I want to grab you back to the right from encoding to retrieval, like not even having to work more, manipulate the information in short-term memory. It's almost like it's happening unconsciously while he's awake, more than what we can or what we normally do. It's almost like the reverse of an intention filter. It's like the filter has been removed almost.
Yeah. And so you brought up things like autism and obsessive compulsive disorder. And in those individuals, they can kind of fixate on things, or, they don't necessarily have the right kind of filter. But in this case, he's got the fixation, but he can also move really quickly onto something else.
Yeah.
So it's not quite like this rumination or anything that you would see in OCD or in autism. And the attention to all these details without a filter actually works to his advantage, because I guess he's pulling out the information whenever he needs it.
Yeah, that's so striking, right? Because most of our memory failures tend to be failure to retrieve. Like, it's been encoded. We don't necessarily know all the time that things have been encoded, but we do find them in long-term memory through some kind of memory retrieval function. But a lot of forgetting has to do with not being able to find it again. So it's like that has also been turned off too. Like he calls it perfect recall.
Yeah. So when there's a great study where they were looking at subjects in an fMRI
Mm-hmm.
when they would successfully recall, so remember, or when they would forget. And so with successful recall, there was activity in the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus.
Mm-hmm.
So they were connecting to each other. They were communicating properly. But when they would forget or something was, on the tip of their tongue, it seemed like it would get stuck in the prefrontal cortex.
Interesting.
So you see all this activity. Yeah, you see all this activity in the prefrontal cortex, but I guess the hippocampus either wasn't receiving it well or wasn't translating it well, not integrating the information well. I'm not really sure what the actual mechanism is there. But he's got this kind of perfect alignment with his prefrontal cortex and hippocampus.
Yeah, it's very cool that his memory works that way, because I think I shouldn't say of all, actually. I think of many people that I've come across, myself included, and so I'm going to ask you this question too, Christina. To me, this seemed like the effect that I would most love, right? Having this like perfect eidetic memory. That would be great. I would love that. I've asked my students this question here and there, and I get a split. Most people say that they would want enhanced memory. It's like 60-40 split. So Christina, where do you sit on this? Would you want this temporary, right? Because it is temporary. Let's just add that assumption to the list here. This temporary perfect recall, or no?
So there's a lot of benefits, but then am I also remembering a lot of bad memories? Am I remembering the details of my worst breakup, of the loss of a loved one? Can I control when these memories come up?
I don't,
Or do they just kind of pop up? And so
you got to stay busy when you're on the NZT.
I guess so. And I don't want to be negative Nancy, but I just worry. And this has kind of come up in our class too. So we're reading The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. And a lot of the case studies have visions or hallucinations, but they all seem to be very positive.
Okay.
And they're never reliving these kind of negative memories, but that certainly happens. So some of my students did a little bit of research, and they're finding that, it's not like when you have a vision, it's always something good, or when you have this hallucination, it's always something good. So I just wonder how much control you have of these memories. And do I want to remember, the epidural being put in the wrong place during my recent childbirth experience?
Oh, so sorry.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But do I want to remember when she was lifted out of me? Yes, I do want to remember that. So I just wonder what kind of control. And then,
so this is a great scientific answer while not also answering the question.
Oh, right. Okay. So I'm going to say maybe like 40% I would want it.
So I think that puts you in a dichotomous, because I forced a dichotomy here. I forced a false dichotomy for sure, but I forced it nevertheless. So that puts you in the 40 no camp, right? The 60-40 split
so,
there.
Okay. If it was
so we're not in
day,
the same if we're not in the same camp.
I know. But if it was like one day, no side effects, like Lindy, I guess she didn't go through withdrawal
she had to take
one
it
time.
And then and she beats this guy.
Yes.
And
Right. Yeah. So if it's a one day, like doesn't seem to have side effects from one time, okay, I will try it. I'll be in the club with you.
But that's not very scientific of you, because once you do it once, the scientist in you demands you do it more than once.
I know, I have to replicate it.
Yeah.
But the curious me that's not curious scientist say, okay, there were really no side effects, and I can wow my students with all my knowledge, then I'll try it. But no, I don't I don't think I'd want it. I just the control aspect.
Well, in order for a career to evolve, I'm going to have to move on.
That you would even think that would only show me how unprepared you are to be on your own. I mean, you do know you're a freak. Your deductive powers are a gift from God or chance or a stray shot of sperm or whatever, or whoever the hell wrote your life script. A gift, not earned. You do not know what I know because you have not earned those powers. You're careless with those powers. You flaunt them and you throw them around like a brat with his trust fund. You haven't had to climb up all the greasy little rungs. You haven't been bored blind at the fundraisers. You haven't done the time in that first marriage to the girl with the right father. You think you can leap over it all in a single bound. You haven't had to bribe or charm or threaten your way to a seat at that table. You don't know how to assess your competition because you haven't competed. Don't make me your competition.
Can I bring up the Van Loon quote?
Yes,
about,
please.
Okay. I think this is a good time. So I really like how he called out Eddie on how Eddie didn't have to work hard to get where he was. He didn't have to experience anything that was like soul sucking, sitting through these fundraisers and all that. He didn't have to climb up the ranks from the bottom. And so I think there's something to be said about experience.
Okay.
And I thought that was just a really beautiful part of the movie of saying, like, you work hard to get where you are. You don't just receive knowledge and you don't have the appreciation for it. So even though you might have some failures, I think that really does make the successes all that more rewarding.
Yes, I was just that's a beautiful overview of that quote. But I was just reading Yuval Noah Harari's Homo Deus book, and I just finished the first chapter of it. I had previously had just finished Homo Sapiens: A Brief History, brief something history. I don't remember the name of the book. But in this first chapter, it was really interesting how Harari frames pretty much the same thing that you just said, and paraphrasing Robert De Niro, in that whatever we become in the future, Homo Deus is about the future of humanity. Whatever we become, we're going to have to reconcile what it is that we want to be. And part of that is the experience of being a human, like going through everything, right? Being part of that journey. So it not have everything just like bleh, thrown at you. And it's interesting because humanity has not been this way historically. It's a great story that we tell ourselves. And it's obviously true for pretty much all humans for all of history, but we tell ourselves the story in this completely different way because each iteration of humans since we've changed has been to constantly do something better. And so I'm sort of arguing from Eddie's side, like, I am doing that. I'm just doing it a little bit better and a lot faster.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, but like, okay, what if we gave babies NZT?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, ethics. I mean, we could get into a lot of ethics in this movie, of course. But yeah, hypothetically speaking, giving it to babies. What do you think?
So then would we have babies that know how to speak not only one language, but multiple languages, within days of birth?
Yeah, I don't know.
But what experiences would they have? And evolutionarily, how are they set up to adapt?
Yeah, there's no Lamarckian genetics here. You can't give babies NZT and then have them produce NZT enhanced offspring. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Right. So
For
don't
it to
know.
be beneficial, right? So you start off with this mechanism, creating it in a lab and seeing what it does, and try to beat evolution. But I don't know. I don't think you can beat evolution, to be honest with you.
No, I don't. I mean, we've had cognitive enhancers, right? Even caffeine, even nicotine
Sure.
are technically, right, like cognitive enhancers. But I don't think people have exceeded the capacity that we already have, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like
it
I
does.
don't think anyone's learning anything more than we normally would. They're just more focused.
Right. Being able to do things a little bit faster. I mean, and you said at the beginning of our conversation that the more far-fetched aspect of this is the speed with which this occurs in the movie, right? And that does have a connection here to the effects that NZT has on Eddie, which not only does he have enhanced memory recall, which you and I are split on whether or not that's good, but he also experiences an increase in intelligence. And I'm curious what, as a biologist and neuroscientist, Christina, you would define, just off the top of your head, no looking it up, what you would define intelligence as from that perspective.
That's so challenging because there's so many different types of intelligence.
Just broadly, give me your best elevator pitch definition here.
I think intelligence is the ability to have independent critical thought.
Independent critical thought. That's it?
That would be my simple definition. Because, I mean, you're not just, like ChatGPT, a lot of it is just repeating what it has found.
Sure.
It's not independent thought. It's not necessarily critical.
Okay. I got you there. So how would you spin that on a biological level then?
Ooh, from a biological level.
Give it a little accoutrement. So that definition with a little neuroscience accoutrement, right?
Okay. I'll try my best. So I think it would mean that you have good judgment skills, and that would be at a biological level, clear kind of synaptic communication, strong synapses.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Reinforced synapses.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
So
go to myelinated or
myelinated, but also with the more exposure you have to something, the more you do or behavior, the more efficient the synapses are.
Gotcha. Okay.
In responding to one another. Yeah. So these are very challenging questions, Dr. Swan.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say that it really, it would come down to synaptic communication. From a cognitive level, I guess it would be being able to assess things that you've already seen before and coming up with a conclusion or new questions or assessments from that previous information, which is what Eddie is doing, right? He's making all these assessments from the data he's receiving.
Right.
Very efficient way.
I think you did a really good job.
No, okay, I'm sweating over here because that was very, very.
I think that was great. I have no notes. The one thing that I add from a cognitive perspective on intelligence and critical thought is great and a good comparison to our LLM life now, right? So the one thing that I add in my classes and I emphasize is the aspect of intelligence of adaptability and our brains being flexible, right? We are misers, but we are also flexible misers. So we go with what the best choice is that's going to maximize our benefits and minimize our losses. but we're flexible when that's not always the case, or we don't have all of the information to do that. And so this ability would have to exist on a continuum, and that continuum is what many intelligence tests measure, right? Some people refer to the adaptability as fluid intelligence, and the classic dichotomy breakdown of crystallized and fluid intelligences that are sort of inverses of the other. One gets better with age, one gets worse with age, right? So one of the common ideas thrown about from the earliest days of intelligence is that it increases as we grow, as our altricial selves are fairly weak and we'll say world dumb, right? Nature dumb. We don't know a lot of stuff about how to interact with our environment until we get all of this social learning, right? And so intelligence thus, and our adaptability and agility cognitively is very good when we are younger, and then it gradually slows down, right? So that would be the decline of fluid intelligence. So that's why I link in adaptability there. That's a sign of intelligence. That the better flexibility, the more adaptable your thinking is, you can interact with your environment a lot better. And that's really what it all comes down to, responding to our environment.
Yeah. I was just thinking, what does he do with misinformation? Does he know what is bad information?
Eddie? Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Can he differentiate what is good and what is bad? I mean, we'd have to ask him now, right? The movie came out in 2011. The internet is completely different.
But I'm just wondering, or like, we used to think that neurogenesis doesn't occur in adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
But we have evidence.
Yeah, we have evidence now.
Plenty,
right.
in adulthood. So would he know that, even though scientists didn't know that?
Yeah. I mean,
that's what I'm trying
does
to
he
think,
make a breakthrough from existing data, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting because only new data really has promoted this newer conclusion. So, or this refutation of the old conclusion.
Yeah.
That's interesting. He'd have to be aware of new knowledge, or at the end of the movie, maybe he's just bluffing.
Oh.
Right? I think
he's a really good poker player.
Well, yeah, he learned how to it's clear that he has clarity at the end of the movie, because you can tell by the vibrancy and the full color richness of the frame, right? Of the visuals. We are supposed to, as the viewer, recognize that he is at some level, right? On this drug, or changed permanently from this drug.
Permanently, yeah.
And as he explains to Van Loon at the end, like, I developed ways to work out the kinks, right? Just continually advancing the formula to where he now tapered off of it.
After you, Senator. Thanks for stopping by, Carl.
Give us a second. What are you doing? Do you want to be president of the United States, or brain dead, stuck full of tubes?
I'll take my chances.
I told you, your chances don't exist. We shut down your lab.
You don't think some smart-ass in NZT might have 2 or 3 or even 4 labs?
So what? You're not making any more.
That's right, I'm not. I thought better of it. See, once you know what's in it, you can tweak it, re-engineer it, get the bugs out, taper off. I'm off it, Carl.
Well, on it or off it, there's no scenario where you're not working for me.
How are you going to pay me? In cigarettes? Last year, you traded inside information 17 times. Blank checks from Dubai, dumping in Chile, disappeared officials. I mean, you shed a spotlight.
You want to go to war with me?
Away. And trust me when I say this, I'm not even being creative.
There's no way you can be making accusations like that and be walking around alive.
But you would even think that shows me how unprepared you are to fight me.
You're no longer equipped to
I may
fight
be off, but
me.
you think I didn't learn anything? That my synapses didn't change? That I kept absolutely nothing?
You have no idea what kind of enemy I can
That
be.
van's gonna rear end that taxi.
What?
The driver's distracted. He's texting. He's going 30 miles an hour. He's 60 feet to stop. He doesn't have room.
What van?
I see everything, Carl. I'm 50 moves ahead of you and everybody else. What makes you think I don't have a guy with a beat on you right now? How do you know you're gonna be alive this time next year?
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Something's pumping a half mass in there. Walls of your heart are dilated. Aortic valve stenos. You're gonna need to get that replaced.
But you already knew that. You know, you should really be glad about this, because me working for you, you'd end up as my bitch.
Maybe we should cool off, talk again.
I don't think so.
Don't forget the vote.
But I don't know. Does that, again, does the filmmaking give away that he's still on the drug, or is he permanently changed? What do you think? Do you think he's still on it, or do you think he's permanently changed and off of it?
Right. I had three major questions still, and that is the number one major question: is he still on it? Because he claims, I'm off the drugs. My synapses have already changed, which is plausible.
Yeah.
That it could have kind of these long-term effects, but I think he's still on it. I think he's just kind of gotten so used to it, and he's climbed the ranks so high that he doesn't want to risk losing it all. So I think he's still on it at a maybe a tapered level.
Yeah, so not what he was taking throughout the events of the main part of the movie. Okay.
Yeah.
I think he's 100% still on it.
Okay. Yeah.
Not only from the filmmaking perspective, but just from a sort of plot perspective, because I think the ability to detect the crash, the heart thing, and all of that stuff, right? Yeah. But him talking a big game to Van Loon is, I think, what sells it. And then he just uses these crash and heart like things that would be relatively easy to for an observant person to abduce, right? So you see if he's just looking over at the cab, he knows that cab is stopping. And then, as you're right, as you described later, perhaps he could see a little bit more clearly into the driver. But he kind of just took a guess on the brakes being bad in the van, right? And you can make a reasonable assumption that a man the age of Van Loon probably has some cardiovascular disease, right? Like statistically, you'd be on the right side being going like, oh, I'm going to do this magic trick by feeling your heart, and just be like, go and go on a limb and guess. And his facial expression is going to tell you, because you can detect those.
He's gonna tell.
Because you're going to be able to detect those micro movements. So I think, there are a lot of things there that NZT couldn't do generally. But I think he's still on it. I agree that it's probably on a lower amount, especially if he's put his brain power into working out the kinks. Whether he's done this like legitimately and he's not a massive criminal running for the Senate.
Right. That was my second question. Who killed the socialite? Did he do it?
I think as the audience, we are meant to think he did.
But why?
I don't know. It's
poor socialite.
I also kind of think that maybe that they didn't know how to reconcile that, so they yada over it.
Yeah, a little hand waving. My third question was, do you think Lindy, the girlfriend, did it again? Or was it one and done?
I don't know. She's sort of, again, I said this in the intro, she's sort of a one-dimensional character. She is meant to be the morality anchor to Eddie. Like she has, I don't feel like her character has any self-identity of her own, like self-will in this movie. Like her entire purpose is to serve as a knock to Eddie, as a counterweight. And so at the end of the movie, when she's looking fresh in the restaurant, she looks pretty done up, but I don't know. I actually never gave too much thought to it because I don't know how much you're supposed to care about her character because of how one-dimensional she is. What do you think?
But it does. I don't think she's on it, and so it shows that okay, you I guess could take it once and be okay. But yeah, I don't think she liked the feeling of it, because she said, I did things that I never would have done.
Yeah.
So I don't think she would run that risk to do it again.
I feel that. I agree. Yeah, there's not enough for me. I think that's a pretty decent argument,
Yeah.
So one last thing that you said, and I just wanted to call this out before we end here, is that with $800 a pill, this is more or less the state of life as it is. Again, in Harari's book, Homo Deus, a mortality, that is the ability to live an unending life, but still can die, right? So the difference between immortality. So immortals can still die, they just won't die of old age. And a question Harari raises in this book is that, well, that a mortality is only going to be available for those who can afford it, right? And you bring up a good point by saying that at $800 a pill, if that were a legitimate price for a fake FDA approved drug spiel, right? Then this massive amounts of memory and intelligence boosting is really only going to be for the wealthy,
for the haves, and then it could really separate out the society intelligence wise.
Yeah, the dominant remain dominant because they are so much smarter and they have all of the money, and they continue
all the money
to get all of the money, and they continue to have all of the smarts, and the rest of the public is just left to their devices.
Right. Standard intelligence.
Yeah, standard intelligence, evolutionary intelligence, while the other ones are just factory. Factory intelligence. Yeah. Well, I want to thank Dr. Christina Ragan for joining me to discuss Limitless. Before we say goodbye, Christina, I know we weren't angry, but I'd like for the folks to know where, because of all of the tumultuous change in the last 4 or 5 years, where can people find out about your work in the Mama Lab, and anything else you'd like to plug?
Yeah, sure. So I do have a Weebly website.
Okay.
Christina Ragan at Weebly. But my big thing that I would like to invite people to is our neuroscience teaching conference. So I co-direct this with Dr. Melissa Maffeo and Dr. Katie Lack over at Wake Forest. And this year it's July 17th to the 19th at Wake Forest in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So it's a great place to learn and exchange ideas that are related to teaching neuroscience. And it's going to fall on not only my birthday, but also my baby's first birthday. So
well
come
done.
for the nerds, come for the nerds, stay for the joint birthday parties. And you can find out more at neuteachingconference.org.
Excellent. I will link those in the show notes. I wish it were closer because I would totally go. Can't make it out to Winston-Salem, unfortunately.
That's all right, but we'd love to have you. And there are virtual options too, so you can access some of the content that we have at the conference.
It's almost like I knew that. Well,
almost, but now you know for sure.
Well, thanks for stopping by again for our quote-unquote Rage Watch. Christina, I appreciate it.
Thank you. And I have a smile on my face, so not so ragey Rage Watch. So thanks for having me back.
And that's going to do it for this episode. Until the next one, thanks for listening.